Welcome back to another session of Math with Mac. This is our third lesson, and today I'm going to be discussing decimals and place value. I'm talking about numbers that are less than or smaller than 1. We'll take a whole and we'll divide it into smaller parts. I'll be talking about terms like tenths and hundredths. I'm also going to show how to do some basic addition and subtraction with regrouping using decimals in my questions and answers. Here I've drawn 3 different shapes, and these shapes I'm going to use to represent place value. Students will be familiar with these as we've used what's called base 10 blocks in the classroom for the concept of place value and numbers less than 1. Here I have what we call a plate, and you'll notice it's made up of 100 small pieces, or also 10 columns or 10 rows. So for the sake of this lesson, I'm going to refer to this plate as having the value 1. I can take this plate and I can divide it further into 10 what we call rods. And you can see that there's 10 rods either going in this direction or 10 rods going in this direction. These I'm going to refer to as tenths, and they're written as 0.1, and it's written as such, tenth. Finally, I have these small individual blocks or cubes, and they're about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And you can see there's 100 of these in the plate, and we refer to these as hundredths, and it's represented as 0.01, and it's written as hundredths with the emphasis on the TH at the end. So here we have a plate of 1, a rod of tenth, and a small cube as a hundredth. Pause. Here I've drawn a place value table. We've covered this in previous lessons, and I'm going to use a place value table again to explain the concept of tenths and hundredths. I'm going to select this line here to be my place for the decimal. Columns to the left of the decimal will be whole numbers. So this will be my ones column, my tens column, my hundreds column, and so forth. The decimal will be separating the whole numbers from the partial numbers, numbers that are less than 1. My first column to the right of the decimal is my tenths column. And just as these numbers are 10 times bigger than each other, these net numbers are 10 times smaller. So after my 10th column, I will have my 100th column. I'm also going to use the symbols that I introduced earlier in my place value table. So I'll use the plate, which I'll represent with a square like this. I'll use the rod as a symbol as such, and the hundredths will be represented with a small square like this. Here we can put our numbers into a place value table just like this. I encourage your students, your children, to make a table just like mine. Be sure to label the columns just as I have. Also remember, any numbers that have decimals, the decimal point is always going to be on this line. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make up some questions, and then I'm going to enter them into the place value table and show you how to add and subtract numbers with decimals with regrouping using a place value table. Pause. Here's my first question. I have 16.47 plus 7.96. Another way that I could read this question would also be 16 and 47 hundredths plus 7 and 96 hundredths. I'm going to now put these values, these numbers, into my table, and then we'll add them. This is my first number in the question, so it's going to be the number on the top of my table. I always start with the smallest value and work from right to left. In this case, my 7 is in the smallest value, it's in the hundredths, so I'm going to now transpose this number into the table. The 7 belongs to the hundredths column. The 4 belongs to the tenths. I put in my decimal just as it is in the number. I have 6 that belongs in the ones and 1 that belongs in the tens. My second number, 7.96, I'm also going to put it in the same way. Please pay careful attention that the second number is placed below the first number. So we start with the 6. It goes to the hundredths column. The 9 belongs in the tenths. I place my decimal on the line. And finally, the 7 goes in the ones. Now I'm ready to add the two numbers together. I always start with the smallest value possible. In this question, I have numbers in the hundredths column. 7 plus 6 is 13. I write the 3 and I carry the 1 to my tenths. 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 9 more is 14. I write a 4. I carry the 1 to my ones. Don't forget to put the decimal in your answer as well. 6 plus 1 is 7. Adding 7 more gives me 14. I write the 4. And I carry my other 1 to the tens. 1 plus 1 is 2. My answer now will be 24.43, or 24 and 43 hundredths. I'm going to show you a similar question. This time we're going to use subtraction. Here, my second question, I have 8.36 minus 5.75. I'm going to draw another place value table quickly. We're going to subtract the numbers. We're going to also show some regrouping. Pause. Here I've drawn another place value table, and I'm going to put the numbers now into the table. I'm going to start with my first number at the top. The 6 goes in the hundredths. The 3 goes in the tenths, decimal on the line, and 8 goes into the ones. I'm going to go right now below the first number. My 5 goes in the hundredths. The 7 goes in the tenths. Put the decimal on the line, and my 5 goes in the ones. Be careful that you pay attention to the order of operation. My first question was addition, but this one is subtraction. So I add my subtraction mark, and now I can solve. Starting in the hundredths, 6 minus 5 is 1. When we get to the tenths, we see that we have 3 minus 7. It's not possible. Some students make the mistake of seeing 7 minus 3 and they would write 4. That is not correct. We are always subtracting the bottom number from the top number. I cannot subtract 7 from 3. We need to make 3 larger. We do this by going next door here to the ones. I can borrow a 1 from here. So we're going to cross out the 8. I take 1 away, that becomes 7. I turn this 1 into 10 tenths. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my plate and I'm now changing it into, I believe that's 10 tenths. So the 1 that I borrowed from here, taking it next door, will give me 13 tenths. Now I can subtract. 13 minus 7 is 6. I write my decimal on the line. And finally, 7 minus 5 is 2. So my answer for the question number 2 is 2.61. Pause. Okay, this is the corrections or solutions part of the video. I'm going to put in the questions and solve them so you can check your work. For the first question, number 1, I have 7.03 minus 6.29. Notice I'm putting the smallest values in first, working from right to left across the board. We start in our hundredths. 3 minus 9 is not possible. I go next door to borrow. I cannot borrow from the tenths. 0 minus 2. So I need to borrow from the ones. I take 1 away from 7, that gives me 6. I take 10 next door, that gives me 10 minus 2. I can borrow from here, this becomes 9. And finally I have 13 minus 9, which is 4. 9 minus 2 is 7. My decimal's on the line. 6 minus 6 is 0. Your answer for question number 1 should be 0.74. Here I've made you some practice examples that you can try on your own. Number 1 reads 7.03 minus 6.29. Number 2 is an addition question, 14.37 plus 29.86. Question 3 is subtraction again, 4.07 minus 3.98. Question 4 is an addition with 3 numbers, 8.75 plus 3.29 plus 8.6. And finally, question 5 is subtraction, 16.24 minus 7.83. I encourage you to try these on your own. Put the values in a place value table, and afterwards I will have a solutions section at the end of the video. So pause the video at that point and try these, and finally you can watch the solutions video at the end and correct your own work. Thank you. For question number 2, I start again in my hundredths. I work my way across the table, putting my first number at the top, my second number down below. Please be careful to pay attention to the order of operation. The first question was subtraction. This one is addition. Starting in my hundredths, 7 plus 6 is 13. I carry the 1. 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 8 is 12. I put a decimal on my answer. I carry the 1. 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 9 is 14. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 more is 4. 44.23 is your answer for question number 2. For question 3, I put my numbers in. Question 3 is a subtraction problem. Starting in the hundredths, 7 minus 8 is not possible. I go next door to borrow. I can't borrow from my tenths. Here I must borrow from the ones. I take 1 away, that leaves me 3. I take 10 next door, I have 10. Borrowing from that, I'm left with 9. Taking 10 next door is 17 minus 8, that gives me 9. 9 minus 9 is 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. Your answer for question number 3 should be 0.09. For question 4, we have 3 numbers to stack. So pay careful attention that you have each question in the right spot. It's an adding problem. Starting in my hundredths, 5 plus 9 is 14. I carry the 1. 7 plus 1 is 8, plus 2 is 10. 6 more gives me 16. Decimal point, carry the 1. 8 plus 1 is 9, plus 3 is 12, plus 8 yields me 20. Your answer for question number question 4 should be 20.64. For question 5, I have 16.24 minus 7.83. Starting in the hundredths, 4 minus 3 is 1. 2 minus 8 is impossible. We're going to borrow not from the ones, but all the way from the tens. I take 1 away, that gives me 0. This becomes 16. I take 1 away, I'm left with 15. I bring 10 next door. 12 minus 8 is 4. Decimal point, 15 minus 7 is 8. Your answer for question number 5 should be 8.41. Okay, so that's a quick review of adding and subtracting using decimals, tenths, and hundredths. I've given you some questions to work on as well as a solution or an answer key. I'd invite you to try more challenging problems, make up your own questions, certainly use larger place values, working in the hundreds, the thousands, 10,000s, or you could also work in smaller place values, for example, in the beyond the hundreds into the thousands or 10,000s. So try some different questions. If you run into any trouble, be sure to email me. I can certainly help you. I'm happy to look at your work. Some kids are now sending me photos of their math work as well. So keep up the great work, and to next video I'll be talking about fractions, and then finally I'll bring the two concepts together, showing a lot of the similarities between fractions, decimals, and how to use them interchangeably. So until then, stay safe and we'll see you soon.